My son-in-law smiled at 1.2 million followers as he held up my 42-inch northern pike, claiming it as his own catch. Another trophy from my lake house. His caption read, I sat across the dinner table watching him show the Instagram post to my daughter, his perfectly manicured hands swiping through comments, praising his fishing skills. My hands, weathered from 47 years of fishing these same waters, calloused from tying the specialized lures he couldn't even name, gripped my coffee mug tighter. Little did Greg know I'd spent the last 6 months documenting every stolen photo, every fabricated fishing story, every client he'd secretly brought to my property without permission. The GPS tags on my photos didn't match his posting locations. The specialized scale I'd installed in my boat recorded weights and timestamps that contradicted his stories. The security cameras I'd hidden around my lake house captured him taking photos with fish I'd caught hours earlier. By the family reunion on July 4th, when he was scheduled to host his big fishing demonstration live stream for his corporate sponsors, everyone would finally see the truth. And what happened next didn't just cost him his online reputation. It destroyed his marriage, his career, and the image he'd spent years fabricating one stolen fish at a time. My name is Margaret Calloway, and I've lived on Silver Pine Lake for 38 years. My late husband, Thomas, and I bought this property in 1985 for $68,000 when it was nothing but a modest cabin with spotty electricity and questionable plumbing. We'd saved for 7 years to afford it, working extra shifts at the hospital where I was a nurse and at the construction company where Thomas was a foreman. This lake was our dream, our sanctuary, the place where we taught our daughter Eliza to swim, to fish, to respect nature and understand its rhythms. Thomas passed away 6 years ago from pancreatic cancer. By then, our cabin had become a comfortable 3-bedroom home worth $950,000, thanks to Thomas's craftsmanship and the surging property values around the lake. The mortgage was paid off. The property taxes were manageable with my pension and small savings. I had everything I needed. I met Greg Turner exactly 9 months after Thomas died. Eliza brought him to Sunday dinner, this handsome marketing executive with perfect teeth and designer clothes. He was attentive, asked questions about the lake house, seemed genuinely interested in Thomas's fishing stories and the collection of lures my husband had handcrafted over the decades. I've always wanted to learn proper fishing, he told me, examining Thomas's prized custom rod. My father never taught me. Something vulnerable flickered across his face. I felt my heart soften. Everyone deserves a second chance at family. They married 8 months later. Small ceremony. Just 30 guests on our dock at sunset. I watched my daughter glow with happiness as she promised forever to Greg. After they returned from their honeymoon in Bali, Greg started visiting the lake house more frequently. I've discovered a passion for fishing, he told me, showing off a modest bass he'd caught. I was thrilled. Someone to share Thomas's legacy, to appreciate the waters he'd loved. I taught Greg everything I knew. The best spots on the lake, how to read the weather, which lures worked for which fish. He seemed eager to learn, taking photos of each catch, no matter how small, proud of his progress. The first 3 years were good. Eliza and Greg built successful careers in Minneapolis. She as an architectural engineer, he as a digital marketing consultant. They visited most weekends in summer, less in winter. Greg always asked to go fishing, and I was happy to oblige. I noticed he had started an Instagram account dedicated to outdoor adventures. Just a hobby, he explained, showing me photos of himself with various fish. Nothing extraordinary, just normal catches any weekend angler might make. Everything changed after Greg's firm landed the Outdoor Elite account in 2022. Suddenly, his hobby fishing page needed more impressive content. His follower count was at 8,500, respectable but not influential. Outdoor Elite wanted their marketing consultants to live the brand, to embody the outdoor lifestyle they were selling. Greg started coming to the lake house alone, claiming to need focused fishing time. While Eliza worked weekends on big projects, I was happy for the company. One Friday evening in April 2022, I caught a 38-inch northern pike, a personal best. Greg wasn't due to arrive until the following morning, so I took photos, carefully released the fish, and couldn't wait to tell him about it. When he arrived, I showed him the pictures over coffee. "That's incredible, Margaret," he said, genuinely impressed. The biggest I've ever caught was maybe 20 inches. 3 days later, my neighbor Frank Wilson called me. "Saw your son-in-law's big catch on that internet site. Didn't know he had it in him." I was confused. Greg had gone home Sunday evening without fishing at all, claiming a work emergency. I checked his Instagram and there it was. My northern pike, but in Greg's hands, at a slightly different angle than my photo. Personal best, 38 inches of fighting spirit on Silver Pine Lake. The post had over 600 likes. I felt a strange mixture of emotions, confusion, disappointment, but also uncertainty. Perhaps I was overreacting? When I called him, he laughed it off. "Oh, I meant to tell you. I caught one just like yours on Sunday morning before I left. Must have been the same fish. They do get caught multiple times, right? What are the odds?" The explanation seemed reasonable enough, though something felt off. The lighting in his photo matched the morning conditions when I'd caught mine. Not Sunday's overcast skies. But I let it go. Family peace seemed more important than a fishing story. 2 weeks later, I landed a beautiful 23-inch walleye. I texted a photo to Eliza and Greg, proud of catching Thomas's favorite fish. Greg responded immediately. "Amazing! Can't wait to try for one that size next weekend." The following Monday, there it was on his Instagram. My walleye, somehow now in his hands, with a different background edited in. "The early bird catches the walleye. Worth the 5 a.m. wake-up call." His post claimed he'd caught it that Sunday, but I knew he and Eliza had only stayed until Saturday afternoon. When I called Eliza to gently ask about it, she sounded confused. "Mom, Greg was definitely with me Saturday night through Sunday in the city. We had dinner with his boss. He hasn't been fishing for 2 weeks because of the Outdoor Elite campaign launch." That's when I started paying closer attention. Over the next 3 months, I noticed a pattern. I would catch something noteworthy. Within days, suspiciously similar fish would appear on Greg's Instagram, always with a compelling story about his early morning dedication or his special technique. His follow account climbed to 28,000, then 45,000. His posts now tagged expensive fishing gear brands and Outdoor Elite products. Occasionally, he would include phrases like, "at my lake house," or "another successful weekend at the family property." By August 2022, I decided to document everything meticulously. I started keeping a detailed fishing journal. Dates, times, weather conditions, precise measurements of every catch, and multiple photos with my phone's GPS location and timestamp feature activated. I also invested in a digital scale that recorded weights and times automatically to my phone. If Greg was stealing my catches, I would have irrefutable proof. Labor Day weekend brought the first direct evidence. I caught a 34-inch muskie on Friday morning. Not my biggest, but respectable and beautifully marked. I took my standard documentation photos, recorded the weight, and released it. Greg and Eliza weren't arriving until Friday evening. When they came, I deliberately didn't mention my catch. Saturday morning, Greg announced he was going fishing at dawn. He returned 3 hours later empty-handed, claiming the fish weren't biting. That evening, while Eliza and I prepared dinner, I glimpsed Greg in the boathouse, photographing himself holding a fish from my freezer. A 32-inch pike I'd caught and kept the previous week for smoking. Monday afternoon, after they'd left, the post appeared. Battle of wills with this 34-inch muskie. 2 hours of tracking this beauty paid off. The fish in the photo was unmistakably my Friday muskie. I recognized the distinctive marking near its gill. but digitally altered to appear in Greg's hands. The post had over 2,000 likes and dozens of comments praising his skill. Outdoor Elite had even commented, "That's why you're on our team. Real fishermen draw authentic outdoors." Authentic. The word stung. There was nothing authentic about what Greg was doing. He was stealing not just my catches, but my lifetime of knowledge, my connection to Thomas, my relationship with the lake, and he was using my property. Property that represented decades of hard work and sacrifice as a backdrop for his fabricated persona. What else was he lying about? I began checking my security cameras more carefully. The system Thomas had installed years ago was basic but functional, covering the house perimeter and dock area for safety. When reviewing September footage, I discovered something troubling. On weekdays when I volunteered at the local library, Greg would sometimes come to the lake house with people I didn't know. Men in expensive outdoor clothing who looked like executives. They would arrive in luxury SUVs, spend the day fishing, usually unsuccessfully, and Greg would show them around the property as if he owned it. "My wife will inherit all this," I heard him tell one visitor. "Just waiting for the right time to renovate and modernize." Modernize? Renovate? This was my home, preserved exactly as Thomas had wanted it. The cedar paneling he'd installed himself, the river rock fireplace he'd built stone by stone, the custom cabinetry that had taken him 3 winters to complete. And Greg was talking about gutting it as if it were already his. October brought another revelation. I discovered Greg had created a professional website for wilderness experience consultations, featuring photos of my lake, house prominently labeled as Turner Lake. Property. He was charging corporate clients $3,500 per day for authentic outdoor experiences, and executive fishing retreats on my property, without my knowledge or permission. The site included glowing testimonials from executives at major companies, Greg's generational knowledge of fishing, and his family's pristine private lake created the perfect setting for our leadership. Team's strategic retreat, wrote the CEO of a Minneapolis tech company. Generational knowledge, family property, private lake, every word a lie. I called Eliza in early November, trying to approach the subject carefully. "Honey, does Greg bring business associates to the lake house during the week?" I asked. "Not that I know of," she said. "He's so busy at the office most days." "Why do you ask?" "Just curious." The neighbors mentioned seeing unfamiliar cars in the driveway sometimes. "Oh, that must be when he goes up to photograph content for his Instagram. It's really taking off, Mom. He's at almost 100,000 followers now, and Outdoor Elite is talking about making him their primary social media representative. Isn't that amazing?" "It certainly is," I agreed, my heart sinking. "He must be quite the fisherman to build such a following. He's worked so hard at it. Gets up at 4 a.m. most weekends to fish before I'm even awake. He's practically obsessed with learning everything about it." Her voice brimmed with pride. "He's talking about us buying our own lake property someday. But I told him nothing could compare to your place. He agrees. Says your place is perfect. Perfect for his lies. Perfect for his business. Perfect for his fake persona." I hung up feeling physically ill. My daughter, my smart, capable daughter, had been completely deceived. But how could I expose Greg without hurting her? Without sounding like a bitter mother-in-law jealous of her son-in-law's success? I needed undeniable evidence, and a plan for revealing it that would protect Eliza as much as possible. December 22nd. The situation escalated. I was in town running errands when a notification from my security system pinged my phone. The lake house front door had been opened. I checked the camera feed to see Greg leading 4 men in suits through my home. This wasn't a fishing expedition. This looked like a property tour. I watched in growing horror as Greg walked them through each room, discussing potential renovations and modernization opportunities. He pointed out walls that could be removed, vintage features that could be updated, and even indicated where a hot tub and outdoor kitchen could be installed on the deck Thomas had built by hand. Once, The property transfer is complete, he told the men. We'll begin renovations immediately. My plan is to convert this into a luxury retreat center, catering to C-suite executives looking for authentic outdoor experiences. The social media platform I've built establishes me as an authority in this space. I nearly drove off the road. Property transfer! I pulled into a gas station parking lot and continued watching the feed. One man, older than the others, examined the boathouse. And this is all deeded waterfront. Clean title? He asked. Absolutely, Greg assured him. My mother-in-law is elderly and ready to transition to assisted living. We've been managing the property for her for years. The family has agreed it makes more sense to transfer ownership directly to me, since I'm the one with the vision for its future. Elderly? I was 65 years old and in perfect health. Assisted living? The family agreement? Every word was fabricated. I watched them tour the entire property, discussing financing options and business models. When they left, Greg carefully reset the security system, unaware that I had been watching the entire time. That night, I couldn't sleep. The extent of Greg's deception was staggering. He wasn't just stealing my fishing accomplishments. He was planning to steal my home. Had he discussed any of this with Eliza? Did she know about his business ventures, his property plans? Or was she another victim of his lies? Christmas Eve brought more clarity, though not the kind I wanted. Eliza and Greg arrived for our traditional holiday weekend. She brought her famous cranberry bread. He brought an expensive bottle of scotch and his ever-present phone for documenting every moment. During dinner, Greg casually mentioned his social media success. Crossed 250,000 followers last week, he announced. Outdoor Elite is thrilled. They're talking about a branded merchandise line with my name on it. That's wonderful, I said, watching him carefully. All from fishing our little lake. Well, it's the presentation that matters, he replied with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. People connect with authenticity, with real experiences. They're not just following me for the fish. They're buying into a lifestyle built on lies. Later, while Eliza was showering, Greg approached me in the kitchen. Margaret, I've been meaning to talk to you about something important. His tone was solicitous, concerned. Eliza and I have been discussing your future. Have you? I kept my voice neutral as I dried the dinner dishes. We're worried about you out here alone, especially in winter. All these stairs, the isolation, the maintenance. It's a lot for someone your age. I manage just fine, I said, placing a wine glass in the cabinet Thomas had built. Of course you do, he said quickly. But we've been researching some really nice senior communities in Minneapolis. Beautiful apartments, social activities, no maintenance worries. You'd be closer to Eliza. I'm not interested in moving, Greg. His smile tightened. I understand it's a difficult conversation. But practically speaking, this property is wasted on just one person. The taxes alone must be a burden on your fixed income. My finances are not your concern, I replied, struggling to keep my voice even. Family finances are everyone's concern, he countered smoothly, especially when there are opportunities being missed. Did you know this property could generate significant income as a vacation rental? Or that land values here have increased 40% in just 3 years? I'm well aware of what my home is worth, both financially and emotionally. He placed a hand on my shoulder. Just think about it, Margaret. Eliza worries about you constantly. We both do. Wouldn't it be better to transition on your own terms rather than waiting for some health crisis to force the issue? I heard the shower turn off upstairs. Greg squeezed my shoulder and lowered his voice. I've taken the liberty of scheduling a tour at Lakeside Meadows for January 15th. Just to look. You'll love it. They have a fishing pond. He winked as if we were conspirators, then walked out. I stood in my kitchen, hands trembling with anger. The audacity, the calculation, the complete disregard for my autonomy. This wasn't concern. This was the next step in his plan to acquire my property. And he was using my daughter's genuine worry for my well-being as leverage. Later that night, I heard them talking in the guest room, voices carrying through the heating vent as they had since Eliza was a teenager. "Did you talk to Mom about Lakeside Meadows?" Eliza asked. I did. "She's resistant, but that's to be expected initially. Change is hard at her age." "Maybe we're pushing too fast," Eliza said. "She loves this place. Honey, we've discussed this. Your mom can't manage this property much longer. The stairs alone are a broken hip waiting to happen. Do you want her out here alone when that occurs?" "No, but..." "And you know what the doctor said about early intervention with memory issues? I've noticed she's repeating stories more often, forgetting small details." "What doctor? What memory issues?" I had never discussed any such thing with a doctor. "I know." Eliza sighed. "I noticed that too at Thanksgiving. And she did put the salt in the refrigerator last month." I had done no such thing. Greg was planting seeds, manufacturing concerns. "The important thing is that we're here for her," Greg continued. "We'll help her transition with dignity, and once the property is signed over, we can make sure she's financially secure for life." "You really think she'll agree to sign it over? She's always said she wanted me to have it someday." "Of course, and you will, through me. But the tax advantages of transferring it now, rather than as an inheritance, are significant. Plus, I can start the business development immediately instead of waiting years. The Instagram following I've built gives us a runway that might not exist later." "You're right. You're always thinking ahead." "That's my job, babe. And don't worry. Your mom will always have access to visit. I'll make sure the master bedroom is always available to her. It'll still feel like her home, just with better amenities and proper winterization." I stopped listening, my blood boiling. Greg wasn't just planning to take my home. He was actively manipulating my daughter and manufacturing evidence that I was declining mentally. The calculated cruelty of it left me breathless. Christmas morning, I watched Greg open the custom fishing lure I'd made for him. Modeled after Thomas's designs, but crafted by my own hands over the past month. "Wow, Margaret, this is rustic," he said, clearly unimpressed by its handmade quality. Yet an hour later, I observed him photographing it for Instagram, with the caption drafted on his phone. "Priceless heirloom lure, passed down from my wife's grandfather. Craftsmanship you can't buy, such your family tradition. Chuck's a heirloom. Chuck's handmade." I had never felt more invisible, or more resolved to protect what was mine. After Christmas, I decided it was time to take action, but I needed to be strategic. Greg had spent months, years possibly, building his fictitious narrative. He had far more resources than I did, including my own daughter's trust. If this became a case of he said, she said, I wasn't confident I would win. I needed irrefutable evidence and a plan that would expose him completely. New Year's Day, I drove to Minneapolis to visit my old nursing colleague, Sarah Jenkins. Now retired, Sarah had specialized in geriatric care and had dealt with countless cases of elder manipulation. I trusted her judgment implicitly. "This is serious, Margaret," she said after I explained the situation. "What you're describing is elder abuse through deception and manipulation. He's attempting to alienate you from your daughter and gaslight you into surrendering your property." "I know. But how do I prove it without destroying my relationship with Eliza? She loves him. She believes in him." Sarah thought for a moment. "You need 3 things. Comprehensive documentation of his lies, an indisputable moment of exposure, and allies who can support your version of events." "I've started the documentation," I told her, showing her my fishing journal and timestamp evidence of Greg's stolen catches. "But he could claim it's all coincidence." "Then you need something definitive, something he can't explain away or deny. And you need witnesses when it happens." She paused. "When is he most invested in his fishing persona? When does he have the most to lose if exposed?" The answer came immediately. "The July 4th weekend. He's planning a live fishing demonstration at the lake house for his sponsors. He's been talking about it for months, calling it his biggest career opportunity yet. Apparently, Outdoor Elite is sending executives, and several other outdoor brands are considering sponsorship deals. Over $1 million in contracts, according to Eliza. Sarah's eyes widened. That's your moment then. But you'll need irrefutable proof that he can't fish as well as he claims. And you'll need it to happen publicly, with witnesses who matter to him. I nodded slowly, a plan forming in my mind. I think I know exactly how to do that. The next 6 months were dedicated to careful preparation. I installed new, better-hidden security cameras throughout the property, including 2 in the boathouse, and 3 covering the prime fishing spots on my shoreline. I purchased a satellite-enabled GPS tracker that I attached to the underside of my fishing boat, recording every movement on the lake. I installed a weather station that documented conditions hourly: wind speed, temperature, barometric pressure, precipitation, all factors that affected fishing success and could corroborate or contradict Greg's stories. I also began planting seeds with neighbors and local fishing guides. Casual conversations about Greg's impressive catches, questions about techniques he claimed to use, comments about his social media fame. I wanted to gauge if others had noticed discrepancies. Many had, but most were too polite to say anything directly. Frank Wilson, however, was blunt. That boy couldn't catch a cold in flu season unless someone handed it to him. Been watching him fumble around the lake for years. Don't know how he gets those trophy photos unless he's buying fish from the market. In February, I hired a digital forensics specialist recommended by Sarah. Retired FBI, now running a private practice helping families with online fraud cases. For $2,800, he analyzed Greg's social media history, comparing image metadata, identifying digitally altered photos, and documenting inconsistencies in Greg's posting timeline versus his actual whereabouts, verified through cell tower data I had access to via our family plan. His report was comprehensive. 84% of Greg's trophy catch photos showed evidence of digital manipulation. Location data from his phone contradicted his claimed fishing spots 70% of the time. Most damning, the specialist was able to match 37 of Greg's posted fish to my original photographs through distinctive markings and environmental details, proving they were the same fish. By March, Greg had amassed over 800,000 Instagram followers and launched a YouTube channel featuring fishing tips from my family's historic lake property. He rarely brought Eliza to the lake house anymore, claiming he needed to focus on content creation. In reality, he was bringing corporate clients for paid, authentic fishing experiences nearly every weekend, charging them $5,000 per day, according to pricing information I found on his business website. I also discovered, through careful monitoring of the security footage, that Greg had begun bringing professional fishing guides to the property on Thursdays before his client weekends. These guides would catch fish, which Greg would keep in the live well or on ice, then present to his clients as opportunities to catch similar specimens the following day. When clients inevitably failed to catch anything significant, Greg would pull out the guide's catches, claim they'd just been caught, and stage victory photos for everyone. It was an elaborate fraud that went far beyond simply taking credit for my catches. He was systematically monetizing my property, my lifetime of fishing knowledge, and the pristine ecosystem Thomas and I had worked so hard to preserve, all while pushing a narrative that I was declining and needed to surrender my home. April brought another disturbing development. While checking my mail, I discovered a letter from Lakeside Meadows Senior Living addressed to me. Inside was a pre-approval for residence, complete with a floor plan for a 1-bedroom apartment and a move-in date of August 1st. I had never applied, never toured the facility, never expressed any interest whatsoever. The letter referenced an application submitted in my name and a $5,000 deposit already paid to hold the unit. Someone, clearly Greg, had forged my application. I called the facility immediately. Yes, Mrs. Calloway, we've been working with your son-in-law on your transition. He's been so attentive to your needs, ensuring the apartment has adequate natural light and is close to the community fishing pond as you requested. I took a deep breath. I never made those requests. I never authorized my son-in-law to apply on my behalf, and I have no intention of moving to your facility. Silence on the line. Oh dear, this is concerning. Mr. Turner provided signed authorization documents. He said you were having memory issues, and he was helping manage your transition. I have no memory issues, and I never signed any authorization. I believe the documents you received are forgeries. Mrs. Calloway, these are serious allegations. Would you like to come in and discuss this with our resident services director? Absolutely. And I'd like copies of all documentation submitted in my name. 2 days later, I sat in the office of Diane Winters, resident services director at Lakeside Meadows, examining the paperwork Greg had submitted. The forgery was skillful but undeniable. The signature on the authorization forms resembled mine but had subtle differences I could easily identify. More disturbing was the medical assessment included in the file, supposedly completed by Dr. Michael Richardson, documenting my moderate cognitive decline and increasing difficulty with independent living tasks. I had never met Dr. Richardson. The assessment was completely fabricated. Mrs. Calloway, I cannot express how disturbed we are by this, Diane said. We pride ourselves on ethical admissions practices. Had we known these documents were submitted without your knowledge or consent, it's not your fault, I assured her. My son-in-law has gone to extraordinary lengths to create this fiction. I'd appreciate your discretion while I address this situation with my family. Diane agreed to provide copies of all documents and to note in their system that no further communication should occur without my direct involvement. She also refunded the deposit, which had been paid from a joint account Greg shared with Eliza, my daughter's money used to finance this scheme. The May confrontation with Eliza was the hardest part of my journey. I invited her to the lake house alone, specifically requesting that Greg not attend. She arrived looking concerned, probably expecting to find me confused or injured. Mom, what's going on? Greg said you sounded disoriented on the phone. I hadn't spoken to Greg in over a week. Another lie. I'm perfectly fine, Eliza, but we need to have a difficult conversation about Greg. Her face immediately hardened. If this is about his Instagram success or the business he's building, I don't want to hear it. I know you're traditional and don't understand social media, but what he's doing is the future. This isn't about social media. It's about honesty. Please, just look at what I've found. I showed her everything. The forged Lakeside Meadows documents, the fake medical assessment, the security footage of Greg bringing clients to our property, the digital forensics report proving he'd stolen my catches and fabricated his expertise. I showed her his business website advertising Turner Lake property and charging thousands for access. I played recordings of him discussing renovating my house and forcing my transition to assisted living. She sat silent through it all, her face cycling through disbelief, anger, confusion, and finally, devastating hurt. This can't be real, she whispered. Greg wouldn't. He couldn't. She picked up the forged medical assessment with trembling hands. He told me you'd seen Dr. Richardson in February, that he'd diagnosed early-stage dementia. That's why we've been looking at Lakeside Meadows. I've never been diagnosed with any cognitive condition, Eliza. I had my regular physical in March with Dr. Leland. You can call her office to confirm. Perfect health for my age. Tears slipped down her cheeks. The property plans? Did you know about those? Not until I overheard him discussing them with potential investors in December. He told me you had agreed to transfer the property to us because maintaining it was becoming too difficult, that we'd ensure you always had access, and would use the proceeds from his business to support your retirement. I took my daughter's hands. Sweetheart, I have never discussed transferring this property to anyone. This is my home. Eventually, yes, you will inherit it. But that was always going to be your inheritance, not Greg's business opportunity. She pulled away suddenly. This could all be misunderstandings, miscommunications. Greg is ambitious, yes, but he wouldn't deliberately lie to me. Not about something this important. I understand you need to believe that. But please look at the evidence objectively. These aren't misunderstandings. They're calculated deceptions. Eliza stood up, gathering her purse. I need to talk to Greg, hear his side. I expected you would. But please, don't tell him everything you've seen today. Not yet. I'm asking you to wait until July 4th weekend. Why? What happens then? Greg's big live demonstration. His chance to prove his fishing expertise in front of all his sponsors. If what I've shown you is wrong, if he truly is the expert fisherman he claims to be, then it will be obvious to everyone, and I will apologize publicly for my suspicions. And if you're right, her voice was barely audible, then the truth comes out on his terms, in the spotlight he's created for himself. She hesitated, then nodded once. I won't say anything until then. But, Mom, if you're wrong about this... I know, sweetheart. I know. After Eliza left, I sat on the dock for hours, watching the lake Thomas and I had loved, wondering if I'd just destroyed my relationship with my only child. But the alternative, allowing Greg to continue his deception, to manipulate Eliza, to steal my home and erase Thomas's legacy, was unthinkable. June was spent finalizing my plan. I installed underwater cameras at the 3 best fishing spots on the lake, locations I had deliberately not shown Greg despite his questions over the years. I prepared special lures designed for the specific conditions of early July on Silver Pine Lake, knowledge accumulated over 4 decades that couldn't be researched or purchased. I had custom t-shirts made for the event that read, Silver Pine Lake, Callaway family property, since 1985, for all the neighbors to wear. And I hired a professional videographer friend of Sarah's to document the entire demonstration as a surprise gift for Greg. Most importantly, I reached out to Charles Winters, CEO of Outdoor Elite, ostensibly to ensure the event would have everything his team needed. Our conversation was enlightening. Mrs. Callaway, thank you for your call. Greg speaks so highly of you and your family's fishing heritage. We're excited to finally visit the property that's been the backdrop for so much amazing content. Happy to help, Mr. Winters. I just want to be sure I understand the format of the demonstration. Greg will be showing your team his fishing techniques, actually catching fish during the live stream. That's the plan. 2 hours. Live on Instagram and YouTube, showcasing the authentic techniques that have built his following. We've got 3 other outdoor brands sending representatives as well. If all goes well, we're prepared to offer Greg our largest influencer contract to date, plus a signature line of fishing equipment. How wonderful. And this contract? It's contingent on his demonstrated expertise? Absolutely. Our brand is built on authenticity. Our customers trust that our ambassadors have legitimate skills and knowledge. Greg's content has been impressive, but this live demonstration will confirm what his followers already believe, that he's the real deal. I see. Well, I'll ensure everything is perfect for the demonstration. One more thing, Mrs. Callaway. Greg mentioned you might be ready to discuss property usage rights. Our legal team has prepared some preliminary documents outlining commercial licensing of the location for future content. Did he? How presumptuous. We can certainly discuss that after the demonstration. The week before July 4th, Greg arrived at the lake house with an entourage, a professional photographer, a social media manager, and a production assistant. He barely acknowledged my presence as they set up equipment around the property, positioning cameras for the best angles, testing lighting setups, and marking spots for the live stream. We'll need the boathouse cleared by Thursday. He instructed me, not looking up from his phone. The outdoor elite team needs it for equipment storage. The boathouse belongs to me, Greg, as does everything else here. He finally looked up, irritation flashing across his face. Margaret, we've discussed this. The demonstration is a huge opportunity for all of us. For you, perhaps. I don't recall how I benefit from you commandeering my property and presenting it as your own. He lowered his voice, stepping closer. This attitude isn't helping anyone, especially not yourself. Eliza and I are trying to secure your future. The contracts I'm signing will ensure you're taken care of. I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Of course you are, for now. But everyone needs help eventually. Wouldn't it be better to plan that transition while you still can? The threat was thinly veiled. Accept his takeover willingly, or be forced out when he manufactured enough evidence of my decline. I pretended to relent. You're right. I'm being difficult. Use whatever you need for the demonstration. We'll discuss the future afterward. Relief spread across his face. That's the spirit. You'll see. This is going to benefit everyone. The outdoor elite contract alone is worth over $800,000. That kind of security doesn't come along every day. I smiled and nodded. The compliant mother-in-law he expected me to be. Inside, I was calmly finalizing the details of his downfall. July 4th weekend arrived with perfect weather. Clear skies, light breeze, optimal fishing conditions. Greg's team had transformed my property into a production set. Banners featuring his face and the Outdoor Elite logo hung from trees. A professional stage had been erected on the lawn, displaying high-end fishing equipment with Greg's social media handle prominently featured. His team had even set up a merchandise table selling Greg Turner signature hats, t-shirts, and fishing accessories. The morning of July 4th, guests began arriving early. Outdoor Elite executives in matching polos, representatives from Shimano, Bass Pro Shops, and Columbia Sportswear, local outdoor media, neighbors, wearing my custom t-shirts as planned. And finally, Eliza, who had been distant since our May conversation but had agreed to attend the demonstration. I caught her eye across the lawn. She looked torn, uncertain. I gave her a small nod. Whatever happened today, my love for her remained unchanged. Greg was in his element, moving confidently among the gathering crowd, shaking hands, posing for photos, playing the role of experienced outdoorsman and social media success story. He wore a custom fishing shirt emblazoned with sponsor logos and carried a high-end rod I'd never seen before. "Everyone, welcome to Turner Lake," he announced to applause from his team. "I'm thrilled to have you all here at my family's property for this special demonstration." I stood silently at the edge of the crowd, watching the neighbors exchange glances at his claim of ownership. Frank Wilson caught my eye and raised an eyebrow. I gave him a subtle smile. "Before we begin," Greg continued, "I want to thank my mother-in-law, Margaret, for her support." He gestured vaguely in my direction without making eye contact. "Today I'll be demonstrating the techniques that have helped me land some of the impressive catches you've seen on my channels. We'll be live streaming to over 1 million followers starting at noon, so please be mindful of camera positions." Charles Winters approached the makeshift stage. "Greg, Outdoor Elite is proud to be here today. Our customers value authenticity and real expertise, which is exactly what your content represents. We're excited to see your skills in action." Greg beamed. "I won't disappoint you, Charles. Silver Pine Lake has been in my family for generations, and I've spent countless hours mastering its secrets." Several neighbors coughed uncomfortably at this blatant lie. Thomas and I had been the first in my family to own property on this lake, and Greg had never spent more than a weekend actually trying to fish it. At 11:45, Greg's team began the final preparations for the livestream. Camera operators took positions. The social media manager reviewed talking points with Greg. The production assistant distributed branded water bottles to guests. I approached Greg quietly. "What exactly are you planning to catch today?" He barely glanced at me. Northern pike. Maybe a muskie if we're lucky. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. I'm sure you do. But perhaps you'd like to use this. I handed him a lure. One of Thomas's special designs, modified by me for the specific conditions of the day. It's been particularly effective this season. He examined it with barely concealed disdain. Thanks, but I'll stick with my professional equipment. These sponsors expect to see their products in action. Of course. Just trying to help. At precisely noon, the live stream began. Greg stood on the dock, facing the camera, Silver Pine Lake sparkling behind him. His delivery was polished, confident. Welcome, everyone. Greg Turner here at my family's lake house, coming to you live for a special fishing demonstration. I'm honored to be joined by executives from Outdoor Elite, Shimano, and other amazing brands who have supported my journey. Today I'll show you exactly how I catch the trophy fish you've seen on my channel. No editing, no second takes, just authentic fishing knowledge passed down through generations. He continued his introduction for several minutes, explaining his special techniques and showcasing the sponsored equipment he would be using. Finally, it was time for the actual demonstration. Greg boarded my fishing boat, accompanied by a camera operator and Charles Winters. We'll head to my secret spot, he told the livestream audience. This location has produced some of my biggest catches, including that 42-inch northern pike from last month's post. I smiled. That secret spot was the most obvious fishing location on the lake, a point that any weekend amateur would try first. The truly productive areas were unmarked, unassuming, and known only to those who had studied the lake for years. I had deliberately never shown Greg these spots, despite his questions. For the next hour, I watched with the rest of the crowd as Greg's demonstration unraveled in real time. He tried spot after spot with growing desperation, using every lure in his expensive collection. Nothing. Not even a small catch. The livestream comments, projected onto a screen for the audience to see, shifted from enthusiastic to confused to openly skeptical. Where are all the trophy fish from your posts? Is this the same lake from your photos? Been watching for an hour and not even a nibble. Greg's confident demeanor began to crack. His commentary became strained, filled with excuses about unusual conditions and fish behavior. Charles Winters looked increasingly uncomfortable. Sometimes even the best spots have slow days, Greg insisted to the camera. That's the authentic fishing experience. It's not always about the catch. Frank Wilson snorted audibly. Convenient philosophy for someone who can't catch anything. During a brief return to dock to change equipment, I approached Charles Winters. He seems to be having trouble today, Sartles nodded tightly. Quite unusual, given his documented success on this lake. Perhaps, I suggested innocently, you'd like to see how the fish are actually biting today. I was out earlier this morning. You fish, Mrs. Calloway? Every day for the past 38 years. Charles hesitated, then nodded. I'd be interested to see that. I retrieved my phone and showed him photos of the 36-inch northern pike I'd caught at 7:30 that morning, with timestamp and GPS location clearly visible. The fish are definitely active today, just not where he's looking. Charles studied the photo, then looked at me with new interest. Would you be willing to demonstrate where and how you caught this? I'd be happy to, after Greg's demonstration concludes, of course. Greg returned to the water for another frustrating hour. By the time he returned to dock, having caught nothing but a single 8-inch bass, the livestream comments had turned brutal. Accusations of fraud, questions about his previous catches, demands for explanation. The executives huddled together, speaking in low voices and casting doubtful glances toward Greg. Technical difficulties with the live stream, Greg announced abruptly. We'll take a short break and resume shortly. As his team scrambled to manage the situation, Charles Winters approached me. "Mrs. Calloway, I believe now would be a good time for your demonstration." I nodded and walked to my modest fishing tackle box. Not the expensive, branded equipment Greg used, but practical tools collected over decades. I selected a hand-tied lure Thomas had taught me to make 30 years ago, attached it to my well-worn rod, and headed for the dock. "I'll need a witness in the boat," I said, "and perhaps someone to document." Charles immediately volunteered, as did a Shimano representative. Greg's videographer, sensing a shift in the wind, offered to film. Greg himself stood frozen on the lawn, watching in disbelief as I took command of the situation. "Mom, what are you doing?" Eliza asked quietly, appearing at my side. "Fishing, dear. Just fishing." We boarded the boat and headed directly to one of my proven spots, an unremarkable section along the eastern shore that most people would pass without a second glance. Within 5 minutes, I had a strike. 10 minutes later, I landed a beautiful 38-inch northern pike, expertly netted it, measured it for the camera, and gently released it after documentation. "That's incredible. Mrs. Calloway," Charles said, genuinely impressed. "Your technique is remarkable." "Just experience," I replied modestly. "Now, let me show you where the muskies feed." Over the next 45 minutes, I caught and released 4 more significant fish, demonstrating different techniques for each. The videographer captured everything. When we returned to the dock, a crowd had gathered, including several neighbors who were openly grinning now. Greg stood apart, his face ashen. Charles Winters addressed him directly. "Greg, would you care to explain the discrepancy between your social media content and today's results? Mrs. Calloway seems considerably more familiar with this lake's fishing patterns." Greg attempted recovery. "Everyone has off days, and Margaret has the advantage of living here, understanding the ecosystem, actually fishing instead of posing with other people's catches," I suggested. A hush fell over the gathering. Greg's social media manager took a step back. The Outdoor Elite executives exchanged glances. "What exactly are you implying?" Greg demanded. "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts." I turned to Charles. "Mr. Winters, over the past 2 years, Greg has systematically taken credit for fish caught by others, primarily mine. He has used my property without permission for commercial purposes, misrepresented his knowledge and skills, and created a completely fictional persona based on stolen accomplishments. These are serious allegations," Charles said carefully. "With serious evidence to support them," I replied, nodding to Frank Wilson, who stepped forward with a laptop. For the next 20 minutes, we presented the evidence to the assembled crowd, side-by-side comparisons of my original fish photos and Greg's posts, claiming them as his own. Security footage of Greg photographing himself with fish from my freezer. The digital forensics report showing manipulation of images. Recordings of Greg bringing clients to my property and misrepresenting ownership. The forged assisted living documents. All of it. Displayed on a large screen for everyone, including his live stream audience, as his team had neglected to actually end the broadcast. "This is absurd!" Greg sputtered, but his protest sounded hollow even to his own ears. "Margaret clearly has some cognitive issues." "Greg, stop," Eliza said quietly. "I've seen the evidence. I know what you did." The color drained from his face. "Eliza, I can explain." "Explain forging medical documents claiming my mother has dementia? Explain planning to put her in assisted living against her will? Explain stealing her home?" The gathered executives began distancing themselves physically from Greg. His social media manager was openly talking to her colleague about damage control protocols. Charles Winters cleared his throat. "In light of this, Revelation, Outdoor Elite, will be terminating all current and pending agreements with Mr. Turner, effective immediately. Our brand is built on authentic outdoor experiences. What we've witnessed today is the antithesis of our values." The Shimano representative nodded. Same position for Shimano. We cannot be associated with fraudulent representation. One by one, every brand representative present made similar statements. Greg stood alone in the center of the gathering, his carefully constructed world collapsing around him. "You planned this," he said, looking at me with fury. "You deliberately sabotaged me." "No, Greg. I simply presented the truth. You sabotaged yourself with every lie you told, every accomplishment you stole, every manipulation you attempted. Do you have any idea what you've done? Those contracts were worth millions, and they were based on fraud," I replied calmly. "Just like your plans for my property, your claims about my health, and your entire relationship with my daughter." Eliza stepped forward, removing her wedding ring. "I want a divorce, Greg. I'll have my lawyer contact yours tomorrow. Eliza, please? And I want access to all our financial records. If you've been charging people thousands to use my mother's property, I want to know where that money went." The crowd began to disperse. Executives making phone calls, neighbors discussing what they'd witnessed, Greg's team packing up equipment with practiced efficiency. The live stream had finally been turned off, but not before the entire debacle had been broadcast to his million-plus followers. Screenshots were already circulating on social media. His career as an outdoor influencer was definitively over. Greg made one last desperate attempt to salvage something. The house renovations would have benefited everyone. The business would have secured all our futures. I was trying to build something lasting on a foundation of lies, I said. Nothing lasting has ever been built that way. He left an hour later, alone, carrying only his personal belongings. His team departed separately, already distancing themselves from the scandal. Eliza stayed behind, sitting with me on the dock as the sun began to set over Silver Pine Lake. "I should have seen it," she said finally. "There were so many inconsistencies, so many little things that didn't add up." "He was convincing because he believed his own lies," I replied, "and because he understood what people wanted to believe about him." "How did you know? When did you first suspect?" "The day he posted my 38-inch Northern Pike as his own. But I didn't want to believe it either at first. We all want to think the best of those we love." She leaned her head on my shoulder, just as she had as a little girl. "I'm so sorry, Mom. You have nothing to apologize for. You were a victim, too. What happens now?" I looked out at the lake Thomas and I had loved, at the home we'd built together, at the legacy we'd created for our daughter. "Now we go fishing properly, and I teach you everything your father taught me, so that someday, when this place truly is yours, you'll understand its value beyond any dollar amount." 6 months later, the dust had settled. Greg's influencer career was destroyed, his carefully cultivated image irreparably damaged by the viral video of his exposure. The divorce proceeded quickly, with Eliza discovering that Greg had indeed been pocketing thousands from his unauthorized use of my property, money that was eventually returned through legal settlements. The lake house remained unchanged. No renovations, no modernization, just the beautiful, functional home Thomas had created with his own hands. Eliza visited more frequently, often staying for extended periods to work remotely, rediscovering her connection to the property and its history. As for me, I continued fishing nearly every day, documenting my catches through my own modest social media account that had, ironically, gained over 200,000 followers after Greg's exposure. Authentic Angling with Margaret featured actual fishing advice from a lifelong practitioner, with no filters, no exaggerations, and no stolen accomplishments. Outdoor Elite eventually approached me about a potential partnership, not as an influencer, but as a consultant on authentic fishing experiences. I declined politely. My expertise wasn't for sale, but I did agree to occasional educational videos for their conservation initiatives, teaching proper catch and release techniques and responsible fishing practices. One crisp October morning, as Eliza and I sat in the boat her father had built, watching the mist rise off Silver Pine Lake, she asked a question that had clearly been on her mind. Were you ever afraid you might be wrong about Greg? That the evidence might not be convincing enough? I smiled, casting my line toward a spot where Thomas had caught his first muskie decades ago. I wasn't worried about the evidence. Truth has a weight to it, a substance that lies can never achieve. I was only worried about you, about whether our relationship would survive the revelation. I'm stronger than you think, Mom. I know that now. You're your father's daughter, after all. As if on cue, my line went taut with the distinctive pull of a large northern pike. I smiled at Eliza as I began to reel it in, methodically, patiently, just as I'd approached the unmasking of Greg's elaborate deception. The thing about fishing, I told her as the pike broke the surface, is that you can't fake it when it matters. Sooner or later, everyone has to demonstrate what they actually know, what they can actually do. The water doesn't care about your social media following or your expensive equipment. It only respects authentic knowledge, earned through time and experience. We landed the pike, 41 inches, a personal best for the season. I measured it, photographed it with Eliza, and gently released it back into the depths of Silver Pine Lake. No filters, no exaggerations, no stolen glory. Just the simple, profound satisfaction of a catch honestly made. The truth, like that fish, swims free, as it should.